Thrive Guys, Episode 4, Taming Email.
How you doing?
Yeah, I'm okay, mate. Not too bad. Feel a bit tired today. I had an early morning for some reason. I woke up at about 5:30 and I just couldn't. I was awake, completely awake, and so I just went downstairs, made a coffee, and started prepping for this week's show and just having a think about what we want to talk about. And yeah, so I'm about an hour later in terms of my body clock than I usually am, which isn't so bad. That's not the end of the world.
No, embrace it. I didn't think I was too fussed about the whole stonks thing, the Reddit Wall Street stuff. But yeah, I placed a bit of money in, and I've just been getting up at like 4 a.m. thinking, oh no, what have I done? I'm sweating, thinking, oh crap. But it's a societal change potentially.
We talked last week about starting a new segment in today's show, and
correct.
So I think this is a good place to start. So new segment called Win of the Week, where I think we get into a lot of the micro detail in terms of how we do certain processes, and we really get under the skin of how we run our lives. And I think this is a good opportunity for us to kind of, talk about the fruits of our labour, I suppose, and,
Yes.
and feel a little bit of gratitude around, okay, this is what all of the hard work's paying off for. So why don't you start with your win of the week?
It's so weirdly relating to my win of the week. It's probably music related as opposed to work or productivity related. I was working on a project with a really cool singer. He sounds like a bit Bryan Adams-esque. He's got that really nice gruffness to his voice. And he messaged me saying he needs a track released for Valentine's Day. So I'd put in a lot of work over the weekend, last weekend after our podcast. It literally came in probably about an hour after we finished. He messaged me asking if it was possible. And I just said, I don't know. And I put the piano together, the bass, the drums, little string section. And he sent me the vocal over, and it sounded pretty nice. We're just sort of ironing it out now. I think he's decided to push the date back because he wanted to add some more guitars, but that's kind of just how it works. But my win is that, I got given a task and I managed to accomplish it with not really much stress associated to it. I was just like, yeah, I'll give it a go. Worst that can happen is we don't do it.
That sounds great, mate. So I'd be keen to hear it when it's done. I think you made a joke about me last week about Deep Purple. And I guess Bryan Adams is the same decade.
Yeah.
So I'll leave that there. But Bryan Adams is cool, man.
Yeah, exactly.
I like that raspiness. Like, a lot of modern singers nowadays are, raspy, and I vibe that.
Yeah,
That's cool.
It's wicked. It's something that I don't have. I have that angelic voice. I don't have any strength to it, so any power. But no, it's just nice because in terms of being productive, I set out goals across the weekend. In terms of, I didn't sit there from the minute I received his message and go, do you know what, I'm going to work on that for 15 hours or whatever. I just put bits together. There was a bit of back and forth, nice bit of communication. We just managed to get it done. And the thing is, it was quite a heartfelt song about someone he lost. So it was like a bit of, it was like trying to keep that sensitive side of it. So it's a bit different to what I'm used to working on, because I'm normally listening to sort of upbeat stuff and a bit more positive and funkier stuff. So that's my win of the week.
Decent. So I've got 2 wins of the week.
It's win, singular, not plural. But
why have one when you can have 2?
Yeah, but I'll let you have it because we missed a couple of weeks. So
that's true. Okay, so I'm making up for lost time.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. So in keeping with the spring of reading, which is the first season of my year of prestige, I read every day this week. And this is the 3rd book this year that I'm reading. The book's called Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl, and it's probably one of the best books I've ever read. I mean, I don't actually read it. I listen to it because I find that's...
It's one of the 3rd books you've ever read.
Yeah, but it's incredible. So it's about the author's time in a concentration camp. So he was just a regular person, and he got a lot of time in Auschwitz. So he was a psychologist, so he kind of looked at it in perhaps a different way to the way that the other stories have kind of been told. And it's all about what it taught him about finding meaning in suffering. And, I'm only kind of part way through at the moment. But it's awesome. It's been brilliant. So I've been listening to that on my walks. And yeah, that's been really, really good. So I guess my win is doing it consistently every day.
Yeah, exactly. Repetitiveness is the kind of key to building a habit, isn't it? Yeah.
I'm forming that habit. Exactly.
That's awesome.
And my other win of the week is a work win. I think we talked about this earlier this week. I achieved my annual quota in month 7 of the financial year. I've never done that before.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
There's fireworks going off right behind me, as you can see.
Yeah. There's that, it's like that.
Yeah, exactly.
So I've never done that before. And actually it was, it's the biggest order intake that I've ever had. And the revenue is a personal record for me too. Now, I'm not just humble bragging. The reason why I wanted to bring it up on this podcast as a win of the week is I owe it to two things primarily. Number one, I owe it to some changes in the way that I kind of run my sales process. So it's process related in terms of the reason why things have gone the way that they've gone. But the way I've implemented that sales process change in Notion, and I've really leaned into it, has been the main catalyst of why I've been able to accelerate in what is arguably an economic downturn to where I'm at now. So, it really plays into having a process, sticking to that process, and, using technology to never forget anything, essentially. Because,
Yeah.
and we'll talk about it in a minute. Email is going to be where we're going to be kind of focusing our time today, because I'm keen to understand what email is like for you in your role, because your role and my role are quite different. But yeah, this has genuinely changed my life for the better, in more ways than one.
It's probably worth as well trying to set aside time to talk in perhaps another episode about, if it's not too intrusive to what you do, just, I guess, your sales process and how you've turned it around to be more productive. Because I've seen your Notion and it's really useful, not for me because obviously I don't deal with sales, but I can use similar concepts from that to deal with my own personal income and, my outgoings and stuff like that. And just, I think it's good from a planning perspective. As I said, as long as it's not too intrusive in terms of what you do for work, or, it would be good to
we can talk about the general principles.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, we can absolutely talk about the general principles. Happy to do that. And yeah, it's important to kind of share these things and share successes. And, if there's something that I'm doing that someone else can take some value from, either in their personal or their professional life, then, I'm more than happy to share the wealth. So
yeah, exactly. Well, that's my point. People listening might just find some value in what you do in another aspect of their life. It's like, they might just find it easy for budgeting or just for setting aside goals. And that's kind of the point of this podcast is that, people get value from listening to it. So
definitely.
Yeah, we set this episode up to talk about email as a whole, which is kind of a bit of a broad subject, but
well, I'll kind of explain the reason why I wanted to talk about it, and then we can kind of get into kind of the 4 main topics of what we're going to speak about today. I think it would be fair to say that email is a double-edged sword. It's a necessary evil, let's
Correct.
say. That's probably a better way of putting it, right? So most of the business communication in today's world, especially given that, people aren't currently in offices in a big way, especially in the UK, is email. And it's primarily, it's very important to my role. Probably 80% of my communication is via email with customers and also with internal colleagues. And it can get completely out of control. And, there is a whole raft of articles on various websites about how to tame email and about how email is a massive cause of stress and all of that sort of stuff. And our conversation week before last about disconnecting really got me thinking about email and about how that's probably, of all the things, something that if you're really going to get to that next level, if you're going to kind of 10x your output, email is something that you need to have a handle on. So I guess what I was keen to kind of put to you today is how prevalent is email to your work? How do you perceive it? and how do you tame your inbox? And I'll share sort of what I think about those topics as well, and maybe we'll finish off with what we think we could do better. So
Yep.
Why don't we start with just kind of an intro to what email is in your world, and then then we'll kind of just go from there. How does that sound?
Yeah, perfect. So from a day-to-day basis, my email serves two functions, which is I have comms regarding like support cases and, stuff that I'm fixing. And that'll be done within a ticketing system. You've got the service nows, the service desks and all that sort of stuff. So I reply just in browser, pop-up window, and I'll respond. And that keeps a decent audit trail of who I'm speaking to, when I'm speaking to. So I can see someone's emailed in. So for example, you've called me up and said, oh, my whole network's down. I raised a ticket and I send an email from that so I can see that it's gone out to you. You've received it, you've responded, and it will just flash up as a notification. And I'm like, all right, cool, this guy's about. So because sometimes you could be dealing, with anywhere between sort of 20 and 50 tickets, whatever it is. So when you're looking through that list, it's nice to just see that you've got like a little red email tick that says something's coming in. But then from I have obviously just an Outlook email address, which is mainly for informational comms from the business, or like I did try and summarize it like in terms of the forms of email that I receive, and it's client email, because I'd still receive client emails to my Outlook if it's not a ticket based thing, if it's just like, oh, have you seen this before or whatever. So you've got client based emails, you've got spam and shit, which come under the same bracket, which everyone gets obviously. You've got informational, and then you've got a call to action. And if you could split those into percentages, you'd probably say you've got like, I don't know, maybe 20% client emails, 60% informational.
Yeah.
And the rest is spam and call to action. So it's like isolating those into categories makes it so much easier to deal with, because you can just split that off and go, that's a call to action. Let me flag for follow up and just do it. Right. So yeah, my email process differs greatly between my day-to-day tasks and my mailbox itself. What about you? Because I assume when you're dealing with like, I don't know, documents and quotes and stuff like that, and actual figures, and you're negotiating and stuff, a lot of that has to be formalized in an email, right, as well?
Yeah.
You can't just like send a text and say, yeah, we've agreed on X amount of money. Please write back or whatever. Send them a carrier pigeon.
TBX.
Yeah, exactly.
So, yeah, you're absolutely right. So, kind of as I talked about in the intro, for me, 80% of my communication with clients is via email. And, even if you have a phone call with them, it's important that you follow up on the action points in writing, because you then have a kind of a trail of, okay, this is what was discussed, this is what the next actions are, this is what is important, and if you're giving them a message, that you need to have that kind of receipt of delivering that message. The only real way to do that is email. So, it's an important tool, especially in, account management / sales. But a lot of people use it as a bit of a crutch. And so it's got to be used in the right way. So, what I mean by a crutch is people use it to replace proper communication.
Yes, for sure.
I'm always very cognizant of that. So I'd like to use it as sparingly as possible to follow up a phone call, or to follow up a WebEx call, Teams call, whatever it is.
But just on that though, when you send like a summary, do you not find it so much easier to convey your message after you've explained something? You've been on a call, you said, right, here's point A, B, C, and D. Are you happy with that? They go, yeah. And it's like, if you just send that to a client after and say, these are the points we discussed, you got a nice little bullet point, even just from a formatting perspective, it makes that point clear, and it makes the information readable. So when you look back, you're like, right, this is what I said to them. They haven't responded back. It's quite easy for you to follow up on your own audit trail as well.
Yeah, totally. So the reason why I like to do it and use it as follow-up is you don't have to think quite so much about tone and the way that you're delivering the message, because you've already delivered the message in the tone of voice that you wanted to deliver it in, especially if it's a slightly uncomfortable message, or it's a message that, there's a perception that they might not want to hear the message. You can use your expression in the way that you say it to deliver the message in, the way that you want, without being misinterpreted. The number of emails that I've received and sent that I've misinterpreted is crazy. There's I can't remember the percentages, but the actual words that you say in spoken language only account for a very small percentage of like how people perceive it. A lot of it is the way that you say it and the body language and stuff. And so you remove all of that out of an email, out of the conversation when you have an email. So you then, you could fret over an email for 45 minutes where actually you could have a 10-minute phone call, clear up all the points, and then send your follow-up email without all of the fluffy language around, trying to soften the message, because you've already softened the message on the phone. And then you just follow up with the email confirming the points. So I think that, in my role in particular, you always have to use it kind of sparingly and use it in the right way. But I think for me, the reason why I wanted to talk about this really and kind of, get an understanding of a bit more detail around how you manage things, because you're using a service desk, so a lot of the kind of
just say it how it is. The system does it for me.
Yeah, okay, that's what I mean, right? So the system does a lot of what I'm having to hand crank for you. For me, email can be, I'm one of these people that wants to stay on top of my inbox. I'm not one of these people that has 2,000 unread messages and it's a dumpster fire. And I if that was the situation that my inbox was in, I would be anxious to the nth degree. So, it can be a source of dread and a source of stress for me. And I'm very cognizant. I think we talked about this on another episode, and kind of my opinion on your inbox, right?
Yeah.
I'm very conscious that your inbox is basically other people trying to get into your to-do list. They're trying to say, you need to do this thing for me.
Sometimes. The reason I say that is because that's when you split it into a call to action. You can look at an email and go, that's a call to action. That's something on me, and just whack it into a folder. This is something I need to do. That's what Todoist is good at as well, is if you've got Todoist installed on your PC and you get an email, you can right click, or I can't remember where the button is, but you can right click and just be add as a task. So if somebody's like, oh yeah, can you send me that? You're like, yep, that's a call to action. Done. Bish, bash, bosh. That email's ready to do whatever I need to. So you don't have to think about doing it. But then you imagine you get something like, a company-wide email, or I get CC'd into countless amounts of things that I kind of think, yeah, it's nice to be aware, but is this something for me? Or, because it's got no context to it, or I'll get invited to a meeting, there's no agenda or something. I'm like, well, is this for me, or am I just supposed to attend? It's like CCing in people is great, but that's kind of what clogs up a load of people's emails as well. Because you don't CC in everyone and then put a direct message to everyone you CC in, like, oh, by the way, you're being CC'd in because of this. There's no context. It's just send the email. You should be aware.
Reply all and CCing in should be used sparingly, and I actually think in some cases it should be illegal and outlawed. But the point I was trying to make about the people trying to move into your to-do list was, essentially, they're trying to hijack what you're trying to do that day. So, every day you set your intentions in terms of, okay, this is what I want to try and get done. And your inbox will basically try and stop you from doing that. That's the kind of the way that I perceive it in my mind.
It's also a form of delegation from your perspective, or from the sender's perspective. Because, for example, if I sent you an email and said, Joe, remember, we got podcasts coming up this weekend. Can you send me some points? And you don't get back to me because I didn't see that email. I've already that delegation and that kind of push has kind of made it out of my mind. I don't have to think about it. I've told Joe to do it. Or likewise, you respond and say, yeah, I've got these topics. Can you add to it? And then, we get to the weekend and we've got no topics because we've just been going back and forth. But there's a form of delegation that just kind of comes from sending an email, and you feel the person that sent is rubbing their hands together and go, oh, done my job for the day. And it's like, what?
But that's my whole point. Yeah, that's my whole point. And if someone's trying to delegate something to me, that's important to them. It might not be important to me. And so I try where possible to manage that in a way. And actually, I want to kind of come on to how we tame our inboxes in a bit. Mm-hmm. But I try and manage that in a way where I'm not working in my inbox. Because when I used to do that a couple of years ago, I would just spend all my time responding to people,
So do you counteract that by doing anything, or just let it happen?
Well, I was gonna kind of go into detail a bit later on, but essentially, I don't check my email very often during a day.
So that's one of the tips that I kind of follow at the moment, which is, it's not, I sound like a bit of a nerd when I say it, but sometimes I'll just start work 15, 20 minutes early, even half an hour early, so I can get my emails in order and be like, well, I've responded to these people, because they might not necessarily be at work. And if it's informational, for me, when it's from a technical perspective, I can be like, well, I've looked at your issue. this is what we think it is, and this is the actions that are pending you, and I can just get that out of my way and then just start my day fresh. So it's like that's kind of one of the key points, is setting time aside to look at your email, because if it's that important, they will call you.
Definitely.
That's the bottom line. If it's something that's urgent, somebody's going to pick up the phone. They're not going to send you an email and go, "My house is on fire, can you help?" And then when you don't respond, they go, "Oh, my house is burnt down." It's not logical. If the house is burning, they're going to call the fire department probably. But then,
I think you and I look at the way email should be used in the same way. I totally agree, Dan. Like, email is, to me, is asynchronous. And so what I mean by that is it's not texting. It's not phoning. It's not the same, like in the hierarchy of communication, it's not the same. If something's urgent, if it's urgent enough, you're going to have my details, and then you're going to be able to phone me to talk to me about that thing. If you've only got my email, there is nothing that we kind of interact with together that's that urgent. Do you see what I mean? So if someone's only got my email address, they are not in my sphere. That means that anything that's going on with them is important enough to both of us where I'm going to jump on an email right away. It just, because it can't be like that. If you operate your life like that, you're just going to spend all your time responding to emails, and you're never going to get anything valuable done. I try and look at email as something that I check once every couple of hours. That's kind of the way I try and do it. I guess I could liken it to an A&E department or some sort of hospital intake, where if you've ever gone to A&E, you start and you go in and you say, "I've got this wrong with me." And then the person at the desk goes, "Okay, if your arm's falling off," they'll triage you, and they'll probably put you into doing whatever needs to happen sooner than someone who's bumped their head and cracked their head open, but they're kind of fine. They're just, they need to have some painkillers or whatever it might be. And so that triaging process I do at the start of the day. So I'll kind of, to your point, I do a very similar thing where I start kind of 30 minutes earlier. And that'll be kind of the first thing I do, is just check the inbox, triage anything that I need to do. So, and that's either filing, forwarding, or sticking it in my task manager, essentially. That then kind of, de-stresses and makes the inbox, I put it away, essentially, is what I'm trying to say. After I do that initial triage process, I just quit the app. There's no other way that I'm not going to go and check it unless I quit the app. And so, that's the best way I've found. And I just do that every couple of hours, and I end up with a list of emails at the end of the day that I have to do something with. And then those are typically already in my task manager, but as part of my shutdown process, I make sure that everything that is in that kind of, action email list is then in my task manager, because then I'm not working from Outlook, or I'm not working from my mail app. I'm working from a task manager where I should be working from.
It's quite interesting that you use the A&E analogy, because that's kind of how we operate everything. If you look at all of our tasks, if you just set your tasks as patients, you've got the priority of the task and you've got the urgency of the task. And you just kind of move them up the list. If something becomes more urgent, you're literally like, "Bosh, that's now somebody's..."
Exactly.
Both their legs are being chopped off, so they're now top of the list because we've got to do something. But I did have a question in terms of like, do you get a load of spam at your place as well? Because we have like spam filters, but some of them occasionally make it through. But this is something that's in my personal email is prevalent, because obviously you just click through and you sign up to a load of donkey stuff throughout the years, and you just never, I never unsubscribed until about maybe 6 months ago. I started doing this, where I look at my mailbox and there's 20 emails, and of 20 emails, probably one of them I want to read, because I sign up to like a load of like producer websites, so they'll send out free packs, or they'll send out like informational guides, and it's like, "Oh, this might be of interest to you," or "This artist's done this, have a look." And it's like, yeah, that's cool, I can get on board with that. But then it's like, I don't know, I get ClearScore saying your report's updated. It's like, I check that when I feel like it. I don't need an email update from that. It's just unsubscribe. Do you ever unsubscribe to your stuff, or?
So I went through a process maybe 2 years ago where I just unsubscribed to everything, because I don't really get a lot of junk in the work email. I don't actually get a lot of junk at all in the work email. Our spam filters are pretty amazing. I do get the occasional headhunter that somehow find my email address and then they reach out to me. I had one headhunter the other week phone me. Like, they actually phoned me, and I was, do you know what? I was impressed. I was like, wow, okay, somehow you found my number, fair play. And I spoke to her and I said, look, if I'm not looking to move roles, but if I ever hear of someone that is, then, I'll facilitate an intro.
Yeah.
Because I was like, fair play. Like, you actually had the stones to ring me rather than just invade my LinkedIn profile.
I had something that maybe one-ups that, to be honest, where somebody had called into the IVR and asked to be transferred.
I've had that before. Yeah, when I used to work as an office-based role, probably 4 or 5 years ago, I had someone pretend that they were calling from Microsoft. And then they were like, oh, hi, it's someone from blah, blah recruitment. And I was like, wow.
You're not Microsoft. You're not Bill Gates.
Why have you rung me on the desk phone? But yeah, well, there we go. Anyway, so no, I don't get a lot of spam in the work email. Well, I probably get soft spam where it's emails from people that I don't want to hear from, but that's not really newsletters and stuff. My main challenge with email is just the volume of it. And the volume is, there's always something typically that I have to do something with it, whether it's read it or whether it's respond to it or go and find something to respond to it. So
that links back to all of our previous podcasts in terms of how you can deal with that, which is just treat them as tasks. And if it's nothing to do with you, just bin it. If it's informational, read it and go, that's nothing to do with me. I mean, it does take up your time, obviously. If somebody sends you a 15-pager and says, can you make sure you're aware of this? This is something you should be aware of. You just go, if I need to be that aware of it, it probably requires a follow-up. But
if someone wants to send me the equivalent of a 15-page email, they should not expect me to read that immediately and come back to them in 24 hours. They should give me a week to read that.
Exactly. Not now that you've started reading free books.
Well, I listen to them, so I don't even read them.
Text to speech or speech to text, whatever, text to speech. That's what you need.
Do you know, there is a really cool feature in the Outlook iOS app that's called Play My Emails, which essentially uses Cortana or whoever it is to read your emails out to you. So I think it's pretty cool. I've never used it, but, it's kind of a cool thing. I had yesterday, and kind of to my earlier point around email being asynchronous, someone sent me a rather long email. They're not one of my customers. They're a third party that's working with one of my customers. And it was, I won't bore you with the details, but basically there was an inane question that isn't a priority for me whatsoever. It was like, they requested some information that I can get to them whenever. Mm-hmm. It's not important to me. It's not important to my role. They've only emailed me about it because they haven't gone through the right channels to find the answer. And then someone else at this organization phones me and then emails me and then phones me again later that day.
I mean, that's a frustrating mentality to have from just a personal perspective. Is like, for example, even in just your friendship circles, like I wouldn't text you and then call you up and say, Joe, you haven't responded. Can you respond to my text? And then we hang up the call and then text you again and say, thanks for your time on the phone. Can you please respond to the text above? And then call you again and then maybe drop you an email. It's like you kind of have to respect the channels of communication because that's what they're there for.
Yeah, I'm sorry. That is not how you do business.
Yeah, we have really good channels in terms of how you can communicate with people. Like you triage your own emails, which now it makes me sound a bit stuck up, but I have someone that triages like the incidents. We have people that triage the incidents as they come in and assign them to us. So that comms is done immediately. So somebody will assess it and say, well, this is high priority or low priority, and that's going to this engineer, and says to that client, this is going to that engineer. And we're just like, that email's come in, I've already been introduced on behalf of me, and I just say, yeah, looked at it, here you go. So I mean, something that's probably worth chatting about in the differentiator between our roles is, what's your email content like? I know you said you sometimes just send like a summary of a call, but if you were to kind of sum up how you format your emails and how you send them out, because for me, like a lot of my emails that go out to clients aren't really calls to action. They're more, I guess, just mine are pure informational for them, because they'll call me up and say, I've got this issue. And I'll go, well, I've looked at this, I've consolidated these logs and I've put 15 screenshots of different things. And here's the log output. So this is what we believe the issue to be. So I tend to feel like I'm, a bit of an email dumper, because that's how I can send it across. And that then it ends up in like a knowledge base. If it's a good piece of work, I can take that information and put it somewhere else.
Yeah.
So what would you define your email style as? Short to the point or long informational?
No, I mean, it's informational, but there's also calls to action as well. So, so I don't have net new people very often just contact me out of the blue. So a lot of the time it will be, a conversation between, we call them response, like we're writing each other letters basically. So it's more that rather than, because I know that you're sort of in a support and engineering role where your responses need to be kind of a certain style where you provide replication steps and all of that kind of stuff. That's not really what I need to do. All of my emails kind of have to be, well, they don't have to be, but they just are kind of my own in terms of they're rather informal, but they just provide information, they recap actions or they follow up on actions, etc. So I think what I try and do is make them consistent. So I can create templates. And that's something that I do. One of the things that I do to tame my inbox in terms of responding to emails is we use Outlook, and I use the Outlook for Mac app on my computer, and it has the ability to essentially save snippets or templates. They're called My Templates, but in essence, you can create a template for a particular type of response. So I'll give you an example. If a customer asks me about purchasing a particular type of license, I've got a template in Outlook that basically goes through exactly what that license includes, and it even has a formatted box that I just pop the numbers into in terms of when I'm doing a quote, and it has all of the kind of next the calls to action just outlined, so it's consistent. Customer asks me a question, it's click click click, job done, and that always thinking about how I can automate those sorts of responses that don't really take a lot of effort. It's consistent, it's the same for everyone, is massively helpful. So, yeah, it's a long answer to what would seem to be a simple question, but I think it's different in a role like mine where you are, to my earlier point, you're responding to someone's question, but you've got to be mindful of the way that you respond if it's, if you're not having that conversation on the phone. So rather than it being just information and being factual, it's a bit more than that, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it sounds like from your perspective, it's customer gets an issue, they phone, you have a conversation, you diagnose, and then you provide the resolution and what you've done and all of that kind of stuff. Is that right?
Yeah. So you either fix it and you say, congratulations, Mr. Client, this has been fixed for you, and you're welcome, and have a great day. Enjoy your, enjoy your afternoon. Or you go back and say, look, we think we know what the issue is. Because, some systems you can't just like go on and brazenly change something or delete something. It doesn't work like that. So you can just say, these are the next steps. This is what we suspect, So I have like agreed templates that we would use in terms of where you can define what the issue is, because sometimes a client will call in and say, all of our phones are down, and you actually look into it and you're like, well, actually, no, only 2 of them are down, and it's the 2 that are next to you kind of thing. So then you can, I guess, repeat that info back to them and, reissue their statement and say, well, actually, the issue is 2 phones. It's these 2 phones. What troubleshooting we've done so far and what the next steps are. So for me, it outlines a clear action plan. And it means if I can get hit by a bus tomorrow, I can give this to anyone else. Any other engineer should be able to look at that and go, right, I know what the issue is. I know what he's done, and I know what the next steps are. And that's something we agreed as like a team. It's just, it makes for maintaining that sort of system so much easier.
Yeah, makes sense. So I'm quite keen to understand then, because I've kind of got a bit of a better idea of what your inbox is like and what your kind of email world is like. It strikes me that I don't know whether taming your inbox would necessarily be a problem for you, but I'm quite keen to understand what your strategies are to kind of achieve, quote unquote, inbox zero. Well, even if that's something that you aspire to, it might be that you don't. So, yeah, I mean, keen to understand what you do in terms of automation or, managing that process.
So I flag things for follow-up, which is like a key point. Like I'll look at something, and if I don't want to read it then I'll flag it for follow-up, or I'll just leave it mark as unread. Like I'll look into it and go, well, this isn't urgent, mark as unread, and I'll come back to it, because then I'll filter it, at some point in the day and go, out of my 15 emails I've received, I flick it to just those 15. I'll go from bottom up and just go, click through. Is this important? Yes, no. If it's important, then I'll do something. If it's not, then I'll just read it. But I tend to dedicate time in the day. As I said, in the morning, I'll dedicate time to making sure I've got a clean slate. And then for me, it's quite easy because I don't receive a huge volume of emails to my actual mailbox. So I can
Yeah.
deal with it on a per email basis, which is kind of the dream, really. It's not always that way for people, especially when you go on holiday and you come back and you've got to read through a load of them and make sure you're not missing anything. But from like as I said, with a system that does a lot of the legwork for you, I can see who's emailed in, I can see when they emailed in, and I can sort of see, like, it's quite I mean, I would say it's a bit of a niche thing, but like in our system, we have a green email for when you've emailed out and a red email for when it's come in. So you can just look at your list of however many incidents you've got and just see that this one's red. So somebody's definitely come back to me. Is it important? Let me have a look. And I just try and aim to keep that in the green, because the minutes that, you could have like 10 people email in at the same time. And at that point, I'll just go, who emailed in first? A popular phrase that me and a couple of colleagues used to say was like, it's whoever's shouting the loudest at that point. Not that you have unhappy clients, but if somebody calls you in and they're furious, that's obviously the first thing you want to look at.
Yeah, absolutely. It's human nature.
Yeah, exactly. But my inbox is surprisingly tidy in my work life, but my inbox outside it's not as well maintained because I don't need to. But then obviously I do the production business on the side, and that is clean as anything, because you find, as you said, when it comes to like sales and stuff like that, you want to make sure you're clear of like what the brief is, especially when it's someone's like creative process and they want to make a song with you, or they want to have a song a certain way. You want to have that written down in stone. Like you have said that you want it to sound kind of like this, or you want to have these instruments, and this is what we've outlined as part of the work. So I mean, email isn't something I've really struggled with for the majority of my career, because I just don't like having a messy inbox.
Well, it sounds like that green and red thing. If I had that, that would be amazing because you then know, okay. But I guess my role's not really like that. It's not, my role isn't, okay, I've sent that email, that's in the green, therefore there's no further action. It's not that simple. But if there was a way that in my role that could happen, that would be so cool, because it would be, there is no such thing as an open loop if it's all green,
Then you have that on a dashboard in your living room when you're working from home, and somebody says, "What's going on?" and you just go ping, 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 ping. There's 15 ticks. I'm done for the day.
Yeah, that'd be amazing.
That's something I'd definitely like to explore from a tech perspective in terms of how that can be integrated, because it's kind of like its own form of CRM, which is what you do in Notion. So if there's a way of just, I mean, it's not as cut and dry as I'm making it out. Sometimes I have points where like I've emailed a third party and they'll email back like, "Thanks, let me know when you've got this information from the client." And I don't necessarily want to email them back and be like, "Yes, okay, third party, I will definitely get that information from you for the client," just to make it green.
Yeah.
I'll leave that in the red and do what I need to do, because that is an open loop for me. I've got an action. But yeah, it is really, really good just to have like a visual representation, because you can look through your list, however long it is, and you kind of feel a bit less encumbered with the volume of emails that come, because I do receive a lot of emails, but when it's coming into a system that's triaged and a system of tickets that I'm aware of, it kind of just builds up slowly, and yeah, it's good.
Yeah, interesting. So I suppose for me, I kind of had to think about this in terms of, okay, how do I tame, because yours and my role are very different. I've got there is no sales system. We use obviously a enterprise CRM in our business, but it doesn't do what you're describing from a sales point of view. It wouldn't work anyway. It's not the kind of thing that would make sense for the type of selling that we do. But I had to think about what, not just in terms of technology, but what sort of principles do I sort of uphold to make sure that email isn't overwhelming. And the first thing really was not necessarily training, but sort of setting the expectations with customers and colleagues in terms of how I perceive email. And that's not necessarily going to them and saying, "I see email as an asynchronous, communication, blah, 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 so don't expect a response." It's just in the way that I deal with it. So they send me an email. I never respond to it immediately unless it's a really quick thing. Mm-hmm. If it's something that requires a bit more a bit more of a investigation or research, I used to flag it for follow-up, but I don't do that anymore. I move it out of my inbox into a folder called action. So that process of moving it is like, okay, I'm intentionally moving this into something that I need to do. I used to use Flag for follow-up, but then it would end up that I would flag literally every email that I got.
That's the thing. It works if you've got minor tasks coming in. Like for me, in my personal email, it's fine because it's like somebody will say, "We've set you up with a new account because we're bringing a new client on board and they use this. Can you set up an account on it?" And it's like, well, that'll be flagged for follow up. And it's like that maybe occurs once every couple of months. Or somebody says, "Oh, have you got this bit of information?" And because we live in the times of instant message. So people would just normally drop you a message or a phone call and say, "Oh, do you remember this? Can you send that across?" And you're just like, "Yep, do it." Like bish bash bosh, get that out of my way. I don't want to have to think about it. But flag, yeah, you're right. Flagging for follow up is great if you're not just flagging every second email.
Well, exactly. So that didn't really work for me. So I had to do something different. So that's what I did. And I respond to emails in a couple of days normally, and that is the way that I do it. Unless it's really, really urgent or really, really quick, that's the way I'll do it. Because otherwise, if you respond very quickly, or if you respond in the evening, or if you respond outside of working hours, you are setting bang on the wrong expectation and you're causing yourself problems. So I don't do any of that. And so I'm very intentional with when I respond to emails, just as a habit now. The second thing that I do is, because I do time tracking. So I can't remember whether we've talked about this on one of our episodes previously, but I track the type of time that I'm doing. So let's say, for example, if I'm writing a proposal, I'll run a timer for that writing of a proposal, but that'll be tagged as sales-based effort.
Yep.
Now, and if I'm in an internal meeting where we're gassing about something or another, or like a team meeting or something like that, then that is non-sales effort. Any time that I'm working on email, I classify it as non-sales effort. Even if it's about sales stuff, I classify it as non-sales effort because it is, whilst it might be moving an opportunity along, it's the mindset that this is not actively going to get me where I want to be from how I spend my time. So yeah, you might need to send an email to follow up to close some business or whatever it might be, but it's not going to be the primary effort in order to get that thing done. So that's just that's an important distinction that I make in the way that I look at my time to make sure that I'm not just living in email.
Yours seems like a much more sophisticated way of how I kind of operate things. That I know I haven't actually touched on this, but when it comes to like efforts and tasks for me, because I do have quite a lot of tasks that are not necessarily in the system as well, I just use a calendar-based color-coded system. So in Outlook still, but where you're saying you would track your sales-based efforts versus non-sales-based efforts, I would put, and I color-code it so I can look for a week and say, well, this is, and I just classify it as internal meeting or client-facing meeting or client effort. So it's like if client says, "Oh, can you do this for me?" and it's going to take an hour, I'll just whack it in my calendar, be like, yeah, no problem. But that's client work, and I'm booked out, busy in my calendar. But I do that for most of my incidents in my main ticketing system, because although it does all the good stuff, I like to look and reflect at the end of the week and say, well, actually, out of the whole week, it's even 90% green because I've had loads of internal meetings, or brown because I've done loads of client work, whatever, however you categorize. I can't remember what my colors are at the moment. But it's just nice to reflect. So, when you're asked how you're getting on and what's being done and how was your week looking, you can kind of look as a whole and go, well, actually, I've had a lot of internal meetings and it's kind of halted this, or, so it's good. But you kind of track it in a more sophisticated way, and I quite like that. So I might get on board.
Well, I kind of do both, interestingly. Well, you probably know that because I showed you my Thursday.
Yes.
And I showed you what that looked like.
99.99% fulfilled.
Bloody horrific. Good God. That was... I tracked 11 hours of work on Thursday.
All for £10 worth of software, for God's sake.
Yeah, I know, right? I'm glad you brought this up, actually, because I'm quite passionate about how this works in my world. So I look at my calendar as like my budget. So this is like my plan. This is my intention. This is what I've set out for the day, the week, the month, etc. And then my time tracking is the actual. So it's like, right, okay, so I said that I was going to spend an hour doing this proposal. My time tracker says I did 90 minutes. That means that next time I need to book out 90 minutes for doing this kind of proposal, because otherwise it's human nature to grossly underestimate the amount of time something takes to get done. And so putting something on
Really?
the calendar is one thing. Absolutely. Oh, yeah, there's a lot of research on this actually, Dan.
No way.
It's what was it? It's almost twice the amount. So let's say, for example, you say something's going to take a day to do. Statistically, it's more likely to take twice as long than what you say it's going to take. Yeah, it's crazy. I'll find the article that I read and I'll share it with you.
Yeah, I'd be keen to know about that because I just assumed that everyone would overestimate because
No, they don't. It's the complete opposite way. It's the complete opposite.
and I'm not even going to justify why. I think everyone knows why, but you would assume that if you could quote like a day and then just do it in half a day and sit on your hands, like especially when it comes to like music work, it'd probably take a couple of hours. You might have already set up the templates and stuff. It's like, but you account for your time as a and for your years of expertise and stuff like that. But no, that is interesting. So,
but you're billing for that time. That's probably the main difference, is that you're billing on a time. But if you're saying, if you're saying to yourself, I reckon that would take about an hour, So if even in your scenario, right, if you said, I think that's going to take half a day, and you say, oh, maybe a little bit longer. So I'll say it's going to take me a day. Your internal estimate is what we're talking about, not necessarily what your external estimate in terms of, I think this is going to take a day, and that's what you say to your manager or to your client, etc. Because you've obviously built contingency into that, but your perception is that, I'll probably get it done in half a day. I might have a little bit left over to do something else or whatever it might be. But the reality is that, well, there's that law that says that the work will expand into the amount of time that you give it. So that's something to consider as well, I suppose. But yeah, really interesting. And actually, looking at the data that I've captured over the last 6 or 7 months of me tracking my time, it's fair to say that things usually just take longer than you think. So if you chuck something in your diary for half an hour, it's likely that you'll be working on it for 45 minutes or an hour. I don't know why. It's just one of those things. I think it's just human nature. And so that's been quite interesting. So, I kind of I use the color coding in Outlook as well to just give me a bit of an eyeball in a really nice, colorful way to say, okay, well, I've got more internal meetings this week than I've got client meetings. So I probably need to change that and put more client meetings in, because client meetings means generating business, etc. And that's always a good thing. So, it's a nice thing to look at. But then at the end of every day and the end of every week, I go, right, well, how much time have I tracked? How much time have I actually spent generating revenue, generating opportunities and doing all of the stuff that I should be doing versus internal meetings, following up on issues that I really shouldn't be doing, but sometimes there's no one else. And yeah, so, it keeps me accountable for my time, and I have to intentionally start a timer to say, I'm going to start working on non-sales stuff. And that is almost that little barrier where you're like, do I really want to do that? Or do I want to crack on with doing what I'm doing at the moment and actually just do that?
Yeah, applying intent to stuff. I mean, I know this is bordering on not necessarily email related, but it goes back to that point we discussed earlier in an earlier podcast about like just setting a timer and putting some intent to it. So you're like, even if it's something stupid, like I'm going to make a coffee now. You've been sat on the sofa for 2 hours and you're like, I want to make a coffee, and you've been saying it for 2 hours. You just set a timer. Like as I said, I use Forest. I'll just go bish bash bosh. That's 15 minutes. I'm going to focus on making a coffee for 15 minutes. Whatever time is left over, that's great. But I'll set that timer, and then your body kind of just it wakes up. It kind of goes, oh, wait, I've set a timer. I'm running out. Like I need to go. You start chipping it. I've got to get up there and get up, make my coffee. But yeah, I assign intent to almost all my actions. Like I'll look at something, especially if I wake up on a Monday and I've got so many tasks to do. The minute you set like at the moment, I've only got it categorized as work and rest and work, rest, audio work as well, because with audio work I tend to find that you have to take a break after like 30 minutes because you're listening to the same sounds again and again. You just get fatigued if you don't take a break. So I split them off into that, and it's like, well, when it comes to work tasks, I'll just set like I will work for half an hour, and then that's it. I'm done for the day. Finish. Shut off after half hour every day, and then I don't have to finish. I don't have to do anything else.
You're smiling. I can't tell if you're being serious or not.
I'm taking the piss. But no, I set it for half an hour, and then when that time is up, I can look back and see what tasks I've done. See what tasks I've completed, and take a couple of minutes off to stand up or walk around, do anything else, and then come back to it. Set another half an hour, because when I explain the system, I can look through and I might have 30 tickets, but that doesn't mean I've got 30 tasks. It means I've got 30 things that I'm aware of. So I can look at that and go, well, I could probably bosh through these 3 this morning, set that 30-minute timer. I don't necessarily go, that's 10 minutes for each, but I'll go, let me work on top down, that one. If I don't finish it, when the timer's up, I just go, right, it's time to take a 2-minute break, walk around, grab a glass of water, make sure I'm fully hydrated.
Yeah, it makes sense. It's the whole Pomodoro technique, isn't it? It's and Forest is a really good app that does that whole Pomodoro piece. I use something called Toggle, which does have a Pomodoro in it. I don't really use the Pomodoro though. I'm more conscious of where I'm spending my time rather than doing the 25 on, 5 off kind of thing. And I've got an app on my phone called Timery, which is a Toggle client essentially.
I tried that on your recommendation. I just didn't get on with it in my role because for me, I get no value out of looking at it at the end of the week and going, yeah, you've done loads of client work because that's my job. Like I don't split tasks off in that way. So for me to just be like, the way I saw how I would operate it is that at the start of an internal meeting, and I'd just be like, ping, and then I'd sit there, the meeting ends, ping, stop. It's like, and like, oh, I'm starting work now, ping. Like for you, it makes a lot of sense because you can kind of,
I'm doing lots of different things.
Yeah, exactly. But for me, I have internal meetings, client meetings, and just have the same workload just coming back and round and circling round. An endless treadmill, I call it.
I suppose it's also because you're not necessarily responsible for your workload. Like, so let me kind of explain what I mean. So you are in a sounds like a completely reactive role. And so you are given tasks and your job is to do them.
That being said, largely my role is reactive, but the tasks I get that are proactive are communicated to me direct, which are out of the system, which is those minor emails that I get. But I manage that in Notion and I manage that in Todoist, and literally anything. If you text me now and said, yo, Dan, can you have a look at this in a minute? I wouldn't go, yeah, I'll look at that in a minute and set a time. I'll just add that to Todoist and I'll be like, yeah, I'll get to it. So I don't have to think about it. And I do that with all my tasks. Case in point, like my boss asked me to put a load of documentation together for some of our clients that's like specific. And he was like, yeah, can you just get it done at some point next week? I was just like, yeah, set a reminder on Monday to start looking at it. And that'll kind of trickle on each day. If I don't finish it, I'll add a note on it or a comment on it in Todoist and then just go move it to tomorrow. It's an ongoing task. But yeah, but it is largely reactive, to your point. Correct.
I'll try and put you in my shoes. So if you think about those tasks in terms of the proactive tasks, that's basically my entire role in terms of the way that and it's entirely up to me what tasks I do. And I have to choose the tasks that are going to deliver my KPIs. So, quota but also activity. You have to meet the KPIs from an activity point of view because your activity is going to generate the revenue. And if you're struggling with the revenue, the first thing that your company are going to look at is, well, are you doing enough activity? And if you're not, then that's a problem. So you need to make sure that you're doing those things in terms of generating pipe and all that good stuff. So yeah, we're diving back into the task management side of things now, which I love and I find it interesting. I suppose with email, some of the other ways that I try and tame my inbox, we talked about last time actually around not having any notifications on email whatsoever. There is an exception to that, and it's a feature that I absolutely love in the regular old Apple Mail iOS app, and it's VIP. So I had some holiday just before Christmas, and there was a couple of projects that I was working on, and they were just about to kind of to land. But there were some things that I needed to do that we didn't. Basically, we weren't able to complete before I went on holiday.
Poor planning.
I can't go into the detail, but we didn't get to the end goal before I went away. I added my work inbox to the Apple Mail app, and I set up VIPs for these email addresses so that I could actually properly disconnect. I could take a step back out of email, shut my laptop, didn't even have to look at any of the other stuff that was coming in, but I would get a ping on my watch when someone responded. I can dive right in, reply to it, and then I can jump out again, and I don't see my inbox. I'm not in there. And so that was amazing. I loved that. So what you just need to make sure that you do is remember to change those VIPs around. So if you have a VIP for a particular project and then that project closes and then you've still got that person as a VIP, then your watch will just keep going bing, bing, bing every time that person emails you. So, not that that's a big deal, but it's just something to consider. And the last thing I mentioned text bank before and the templates thing. So I've got a text bank of all of my kind of, standard responses and information on the type of stuff that we do. But I also have a number of inbox rules to move dealt with emails. So once an email is dealt with, I can hit a button or hit the button at the end of the week, and it will run all of my rules, and it will just then file all of the emails into the relevant client folders and stuff like that. So that's a really nice way to just tidy everything up in the inbox and just move all the things that you didn't move into the place that it needs to be. So that's really good. That works quite well. I'm certainly not perfect. I don't have everything, nailed down. So I'll ask the question to you. What do you think you could do better when it comes to managing the world of email? To be honest, from what you've said, Dan, it sounds like this will be a short answer, which I'm very jealous of.
Yeah. But you are right. Like, I'm not perfect either. And I kind of just said a minute ago in terms of like setting up folders for my email, and that's something I'm actively looking to improve on, because I have stuff like I'm subscribed to certain websites that will send me notifications if there's any security risks or any bugs or anything like that, and they just come into my inbox, and it's like I could do with categorizing them, and just and that is what I've been doing, is looking for and seeing stuff that's repeat and just going, right, that sometimes we'll access a client, they've got two-factor authentication, it'll be an email to me or whatever. I've set it up as a device notification. However I've done it, and it's like I just want to make sure I know where they are so it doesn't just all come into my inbox and just flood that. I don't want to use my inbox as like the main dumping ground. And it sounds quite cool that you can sort of just filter yours into the relevant locations. But for me, I haven't worked out what flow works for me. I've done it for all my folders on my desktop. Like I created a little code that meant that any file that was on my desktop with a particular prefix would move into the right folder structure on my OneDrive or whatever.
Oh, nice.
It is cool, but I haven't done that yet for email, and that's kind of my next goal. So that's what I'm working to improve. It's not something that bothers me, but it's something that, if you can make little improvements here and there, it improves your whole overall productivity. What about yourself?
Agreed. I have 4 things.
4?
I know you, please indulge me on this, because I know that you're already indulging me by having this conversation, because I think when we spoke before, you did admit that email's not really that much of a problem for me, and I felt the green hands of jealousy just, in my mind's eye, just wrapped around your neck. But anyway, I got a bit dark there, but yeah, I'm like Marge Simpson when she accidentally keeps running over Homer. It's like, I don't know why I keep doing it, but I could check email less. I don't need to check it every couple of hours. I almost have that gnawing feeling still of maybe something's in there, and that's not good. I don't like the way it makes me feel. It's one of the reasons why I got off of social media generally, is because that gnawing feeling didn't make me feel good. And even when there was nothing there, I was like, best check it just to make sure. And it's that my brain's been kind of recalibrated like that. So I could check it less. That would be amazing. I could also expand my text bank. So that text bank that I talked about earlier in terms of using the templates in Outlook, definitely could make that more comprehensive. When I'm sending an email, I don't think about, maybe that would be good for a text bank. But I actually have been doing some work with that. One of the things that I forgot to mention actually earlier when it comes to sort of writing emails is one of the things that I do now to sort of stay out of my inbox, to try and expand my text bank as well, is once I've taken the task out of my inbox and taken it into my task manager, I don't respond to the email in Outlook, because then the app's open and something could ping, the inbox is then filling up and I'm seeing it, and I can get distracted. So I use an app called Drafts, which is a Mac app, an iOS app, and I don't know whether it's on Windows. I don't think it is, to be honest with you. But essentially, it's a really quick Markdown, which is like a type of writing text editor. And so I write my emails in this text editor. But the thing about drafts, which makes it incredible, is the actions piece of the puzzle. And it has a really thriving community of people who are using drafts, and they're really passionate about it. And they can share the actions that they've kind of written. So one of the things it can do once you've written your piece of text is send it in an email. And as long as your default email client is like Outlook, for example, you click that button, it opens Outlook, but it just opens the new email window, and it puts your text in there all formatted and stuff. And then all you've got to do is put the sender in, send the email, and quit the app, and then move on to the next thing. It is so good. It's the one thing that I've done in the last month or so that has really helped me stay out of my inbox and stop getting distracted when I'm, penning an email to a customer and then something else comes in. That doesn't happen anymore because I just write them all in drafts.
That is such a simple idea, and I am here for it. Like, that's crazy.
I
sound like I'm being sarcastic, but that is crazy because it's basically just a standard text editor. But to see someone getting so much, dare I say it, joy out of it.
Joyful. I feel joy. I feel happy talking about it. I know that's sad, right? I know that's sad, but you live in your own world, right?
Yeah.
And it's been the one thing. And if I look at it now, every draft that I've sent is just there. It's just there, and I can take those and I can put that into my templates or into my text bank or whatever it might be, and it's joyful. And it's all just, you write your email in this basically blank canvas, you double click the email button, and then it's just like, right. The thing that I quite like about it is the first line of the blank sheet of paper is the subject line. Mm-hmm. And I think you can also do things like you can put like the to address in it as well. I haven't quite worked that out yet because I don't need to work it out.
You seem fairly new to it anyway, so.
Yeah. I've got to the point where it's working usefully for me, and I don't feel like I feel like adding the to thing is going to be a really diminishing return. It's not really going to give me any extra benefit. It's just going to be, in fact, actually, because Outlook is really good at like saving your recent contacts. It's probably going to take me longer to type in the email address than it would be just
it's doubling up on effort when you've got a directory that already exists from sent recipients. I mean, that seems like something that I'd really benefit from in my personal life in terms of having it for like the production stuff, because I could set up all my templates in terms of I've got a Google Doc for it, but it'd be nice to have like an email if somebody's like, I don't want to log on to Google Docs or I don't want to fill that in. It's just like, whatever, here's an email. I mean, maybe I won't benefit from it, but it's something I want to try for sure, because I think that sounds awesome.
I've got the free version as well. So it's got a free version and a paid subscription for writing your own actions. And some people have done some really cool stuff with it, but it's you can just use the standard actions that are there, and they'll 99 times out of 100 they'll do what you want. So yeah, it's been really, really cool.
I think you should definitely follow up on your templates, because I think that from what it sounds like you're going to get a great amount of more. You'll definitely be value is the word I was looking for. Thank you. You'll get a great amount of value just by having those and being able to copy and paste into them, and that's kind of what I've been trying to do with some of like our standardization of the documents and stuff like that. So when I say about being proactive, that's kind of what I'm doing, is building templates, and that's for issues as well. You just say to someone, here's a common issue. I did actually originally try to do this as like a text-based adventure, which sounds really ridiculous when I say it, but I'm just going to quickly explain that because I think we've boshed out email. But the text-based troubleshooter was going to be where you could go in and they said, what's your issue? And you say, it's with this technology, and it'll go, right, try this. If it doesn't, did that work? Yes or no? No. Next step. No. Next step. And then it will say, you need to collect these logs or you need to do this.
Gotcha.
But the sheer volume of data and the sheer amount of upkeep that it would take just took it. I didn't really have the time to dedicate to it, but that's the dream, having someone to troubleshoot an issue for you.
Yeah, well, that's built into like Microsoft's OS, isn't it?
Yeah.
So I can't imagine that's a simple a simple process.
But you said you had 4 points, sorry. So there was 2 left, right?
Yeah, so, well, one of them's really small and then one of them's slightly a more expanded topic, but it will be brief. So one is I'll check it less at night, which kind of is an extension of point 1. It's point 1A, I know.
You should not be checking emails out of hours at all. You don't get paid for that time, Joe. Your relationship will pay for it in the long run.
No, I don't.
Kaylee's going to be trying to sleep and have a light over her shoulder.
Oh, no, not that bad. No. I don't. So my phone is off. It's on Do Not Disturb. It's on all of the above. And when I'm trying to sleep, that I have no problem with. But when I'm sitting in front of the telly and, we've finished dinner, we're just kind of, chilling out, sometimes my thumb slips and goes into the nested folder where Outlook is. And it goes, maybe just have a look. It's never good news. No one ever emails me at night about anything good. So I don't know why I do it. And anything that is in there can wait for the next day.
You are a glutton for punishment. That's why.
I am. I really am. And I think that actually, I don't, in the current environment, I don't need my email on my phone anymore. So yeah, I might get rid of it. I'll think about it, but I might get rid of it. So the last thing is, and we kind of touched upon this in the task management episode, but if I used a tool that would let me forward email to my task manager without me having to kind of transpose the detail, chef's kiss. That would be flipping brilliant. I would love that.
To-do-ist.
No, it's not. Look. I made a decision to switch out a task manager app in favor of Notion because the emergence in terms of benefit being in Notion is far better and far more meaningful and valuable than, I used Microsoft To Do, which has the same kind of stuff as Todoist, etc. And it was good at what it did, but it was just task management. Whereas Notion, you can basically have tasks connected to projects, connected to customers, connected to campaigns, and it's so much better.
In an ideal world, you would be able to email whatever it is, jp@notion.so, and just in the subject put the client name, and it will add it into that particular location. Like how I've set up my folder structure, is that you have a prefix, and as long as it's got that prefix, it will go into the actions for that client. So you've still got everything maintained in Notion, and you don't necessarily need to forward immediately. But if you get an email from client A, you send it to client A at Notion, whatever it is, or put it in the subject, and it just goes straight into that. That would be incredible.
Do you know, it would be fine if I could just forward it to my action items database. That would be good enough, because then I've got a filtered list, which I call inbox, which basically has every task that I create that doesn't have a due date, that doesn't have a priority. And so just by forwarding to it, that would be everything that I need. And then I can go through my inbox at the end of the day and go, right, how am I going to plan this kind of task out? So I had that in Microsoft To Do. The problem with Microsoft To Do was that once you flagged an email, it was automatically in To Do. And I think there needs to be a bit of a barrier between that. You've got to be more intentional about, okay, is this actually going to be a task, or do I just need to flag it and read it later? And, Notion are coming out with an API at some point in the future. It's in private beta at the moment. And genuinely, if that's behind a paywall, I will pay it. I do not care how much money. Literally, Fry, give me, take my money meme. I do not care. That would be that would get me that extra 10%. Like, Notion is basically there for me now, but it's the transposing of the data into it which takes the time. And there's benefit of having that barrier, right? There's something to say about it not being easy just to throw things at it, because you're more intentional, because you've got to take the time to write the thing out that you need to do. But it would just be nice to just chuck it in, and then that be, do you know what I mean? So, that's something that I can't fix right now, but I need to lay in the bed that I've made for myself.
But it could also just be solved with like an Outlook integration into Notion, and I'm talking just an embedded window. So it'd be like kind of as a page in Notion, because then you could just drag the email into the relevant project on the in your projects folder on the left hand side, and it's done. And it's like your email will just go in there as however formatted it is. Or you could just drag. I mean, I don't know if you can drag an email just as it is into Notion. Never tried it, but
no, you don't. You can't. It doesn't accept that kind of file. You'd have to save it as a PDF and then upload the PDF.
negates the whole point of doing it.
And it wouldn't really give me what I want either. What I want is the ability to essentially create a database entry in Notion for that email, but I want to then decide what the task is called, not just like the subject line. And then I basically want to save a copy of that email to that entry and then be able to click a link and then it jumps into my email, essentially. It's basically, there's a task management system called OmniFocus that does it using callback URLs, where, and I don't know what that is, you probably know more than I do. It basically means that you can hit the URL and it opens the app and then you can see the email in the app, essentially.
Yeah, fine.
Which is pretty cool. So yeah, that's the only thing but that is a corner that I've painted myself into knowingly. But I think, when we're talking about specifically managing email, that is something that would greatly benefit me. So those are my 4 things.
So my question to finish this off then, email, yes or no?
No.
No, thank you.
It's a necessary evil, as I said at the top of the episode.
It's not going away. Like, even with IM coming in, like, people are instant messaging. We have some clients that will IM us. If it's like a real issue, it goes through the triage system. But sometimes a client will just message you and say, "Oh, have you got that? Do you remember when we dealt with this? Do you remember what we done to fix it?" You can just do a quick response, but that is never gonna. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think it's going to get to a point where people are just going to IM between their clients and their business going forwards, and that's it. There will always still somehow be email tailgating along the side, no matter if it becomes more and more obsolete. I think it's always going to be around for the next.
Do you know what? I think that's a good thing, honestly. So think of a world, and this is my idea of hell on earth. Think of a world where communication just becomes completely synchronous. It becomes completely instant, whether it's, obviously we have instant communication in our personal lives, and there's this big, the time it takes you to respond to a text message in terms of what's socially acceptable is far, far shorter than what's socially acceptable to reply to an email. When we stop using email, you go to, a Slack or a Teams or whatever it might be, it then ends up being just like a text message. And whilst it's quicker to reply to a text message, the expectation socially that the world as a whole has in terms of how quickly you should be able to respond to an instant message, I think would be detrimental to anybody who's trying to actually get meaningful work done rather than being distracted. So whilst I did say no as an emotional kind of reaction, I think on reflection, thinking about it a little bit more, email is a necessary evil, and actually I think that there are some really good things about it for everything that I've just described.
Yeah, I'm a big fan because I deal with it, and it makes my life. I kind of just weigh it up in the sense that the amount of emails I receive in the system and personally, if I imagine that now being texts or being phone calls, I would
horrific.
Be inundated, and I would never have any time for anything. So I pray that it doesn't go in the other direction because I'm done.
Could you imagine that, though? Oh, I'm starting to get anxious thinking about it. I'm starting to sweat.
Yeah, I'm finished. My career is over, I'll tell you that.
No, thank you. I'd quit. I'd go work in a shop where you don't have any communications.
Yeah, weirdly, like some of my most recent comms regarding like music production have been through Facebook Messenger as opposed to an email. But I always tend to say, like, what email can I use because I want to follow up on this, as opposed to keeping it in Facebook Messenger, because I don't want to sit there and instant message someone. But that being said, for like a minor change process, I'll set aside like half hour and be like, right, we'll go through some changes, and it's easy for me to just go, I have changed the bass in this bit, can you listen and report back? Otherwise, like, that is longed out via an email process. But
agreed.
But
yeah.
There's certain scenarios that we could blab on about all day.
Let me sum it up. It's horses for courses. There you go. Job done. Thanks everybody for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider subscribing to our show. And if you really, really liked it, please consider giving us a 5-star rating. That really helps us out. It helps us grow our audience. So only if you loved it, but if you did, then that'd be really good. If you'd like to hear more from Dan or myself, please follow us on Twitter @ThriveGuysPod. Otherwise, we'll see you next week. Say goodbye, Dan.
Hasta luego. Goodbye.